I am going to take one step forward, and then there's going to be a lapse, and then I'm going to go 2 steps back.
If you've been drinking a lot for a long period of time, you have to ideally work under medical supervision to get off the alcohol.
We feel that we can shame someone into a corrective behavior.
Families give up, friends give up when there's a lapse. So people on their recovery journey will drink.
So we've spent a good deal of time discussing what the problem looks like, the medical aspect of it, the social implications of it, the psychological trauma and journey of all of it. But I think I want to turn the conversation to a slightly more hopeful front and speak about what recovery looks like.
I think I want to first start by acknowledging that whether in our clinical framework, whether in the way we practice, in the whole discourse around addiction, our stories, our narratives are almost always about the problem, right? And even as practitioners, we focus very little of our training on hope, on recovery, on meaning, on finding meaning in life again. Most of the times, recovery gets confused with craving management or just staying sober or figuring out what sobriety means for each person. And that's where the journey seems to end when we speak of recovery. But recovery is a very complex journey and it's very individual for each person.
And recovery seems extremely elusive to a lot of people who find themselves in the middle of their journey with addiction. So what, according to you, for people who don't have the will or the ability to reach out, what can their families do? What can they do to themselves to enable their recovery journey?
It's a cliche, but a true cliche that it's a very non-linear process. So there is no one moment where you have this thunderbolt realization that I need help. It's actually a series of small micro decisions over a period of time where you come face to face with the reality that what this is giving me is sort of out of sync with what using alcohol or substances is taking away from me. So it's a series of micro decisions, and recovery doesn't start when you enter a clinic or you say, I need help. Actually, recovery can start in the silent admission that you make to yourself that this is not working. And intertwined with recovery, intertwined with hope, is actually the awareness that this will be a non-linear process, which means that I am going to take one step forward, and then there's going to be a lapse, and then I'm going to go 2 steps back, and then it's going to be 1 step forward and another step back. And it is a very circular process. So even before people actually find the right combination of people, support systems, networks to access help, there is a decision balance that's going on in their mind.
I think another common misconception, and maybe this isn't a misconception, but just an intimidating fact, is how taxing and complicated the process of recovery is. Yeah. That it's riddled with, like you said, of course it's non-linear, but it's sort of an everyday battle, and therefore it's just easier to remain in the cycle of being an addict as opposed to going through the entire process of dealing with your addiction and seeking out recovery.
I'm going to say it's complicated. It is, and anything worthwhile will be complicated.
But it's better than remaining where you are.
It's possible, absolutely. It's possible. There are a few, I would say a very practical framework to look at recovery would be your what, your why, and your how. So your what would be knowing what alcohol or the substance is doing for you. What is it doing for you? Because that's the underlying thing that you're going to have to solve for. Just managing cravings or detox won't help with that. It'll help you stay sober. It's a longer term process. That's the what. Then is your why. And that's what people sometimes struggle with. Why do I really want to give up, or why do I want to recover? And you have to revisit your why every day. It's not a one-time thing that today I've decided and now I know this.
Because you forget.
You
sometimes.
forget there is a high-risk situation, there's a trigger, you're celebrating or you're moping, and you'll forget your why. One of the common techniques that we practice in therapy is carry your why in your pocket. It could be your child's picture. It could be the letter that you wrote to yourself. It could be the photo of somebody that you love, who you made a promise to. It could be just a statement that reminds you of who you want to be. So the what, the why, and then in the end comes the how, which is the day-to-day, sometimes hour by hour coping. And that's the complicated part. That's the part where I have to deal with cravings. That's the part where I have to deal with this emotional flattening that results when I leave a substance. I'm going to struggle with sleep. I'm going to struggle with anxiety. I'm going to struggle with mood. But there is help for all of that. You're not going to be left alone, raw, with your most vulnerable feelings. There is detox, there is craving management, there is psychotherapy and counseling and behavior management for dealing with cravings. There is, of course, also coping skills for drink refusal or alcohol or any kind of substance refusal.
We feel that we can shame someone
Absolutely.
into a corrective behavior.
And with substance use, that resistance hardens. With shame, with any kind of shaming, it hardens further. Sit, be non-judgmental, acknowledge what the substance is giving the person. It's obviously giving the person something. It's giving them hope, it's giving them company, it's giving them
an escape.
Maybe life is just unbearable. Acknowledge that. Maybe it's willpower alone will never work, right? So acknowledge that maybe they are trying. There are micro attempts. It can be tiny acts of
Didn't drink
change.
that much today, as I said.
Absolutely, yeah.
My father used to be a smoker. But I remember I was a kid and I would constantly look up ways or ask people or how does one go about this? And what I would always get was it has to be his decision. You can't make him want to quit, ever.
Yeah.
But I find with someone who's addicted to alcohol, because their senses aren't, their senses are
judgment.
altered, their judgment is altered, they're more often than not in a state of delirium.
Yeah.
How do you get them to see the mirror?
Right. If I was to speak just purely as a therapist, there's a term called ambivalence that we use, which means I know it's not right for me, but I can't do this, man. And this ambivalence is something that is very precious because it's telling us that there is a part of me that wants better for myself, but there is a part of me that's deathly afraid of it. Naming those two parts sometimes can be the mirror. And a technique that we use is called motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing is actually figuring out just working with that small part, figuring out your why. What would happen if you were to try? What do you imagine would happen if you were to not drink tomorrow? Have them actually visit their worst fears about what would happen.
And hopefully get them excited about the prospect of a life without alcohol.
Absolutely. And you elicit from them. You don't tell them. You cannot supply the motivation. You absolutely can't. You can supply the questions. You can supply the curiosity, help them, bring them on board to feel curious about what might happen if they were to quit. It is unfortunately the person's decision, but the ecosystem around them can create supportive structures for recovery. Families give up, friends give up when there's a lapse. So people on their recovery journey will drink, and families, friends can end up having a very extreme reaction. The person themselves can end up having an extreme reaction. Oh my God, I have failed. Now let's go back to square one. So actually making friends with lapses and meeting them without shame, without blame, without tumse to kuch nahi hoga, is very critical.
But I want to talk to you a little bit about withdrawals. Because a friend of mine who's dealt with addiction, and something he struggled with very frequently, like you said, was he had trouble falling asleep. He would get night sweats a lot, and sweats in general, and his moods were very erratic. It was almost as if when he was indulging in his addiction, his emotions were far more regulated. And I think that that's what alcohol and other substances do, right? It sort of numbs your senses a little bit.
Absolutely.
It makes you more palatable if you're a high-strung person.
Yeah.
Can you take me through the beats of withdrawal, what it might look like for someone who's coping with recovery on their own,
Right.
at home, and any words of advice to help them through it?
So very simply speaking, withdrawal is the set of psychological, biological, neurological changes that your body and your mind experience when the substance that your body is used to is withdrawn from it, is taken away from it. That withdrawal is actually the complete lack of dopamine in your system.
I think it's important to just reiterate that if you've been drinking a lot for a long period of time, you have to ideally work under medical supervision to get off the alcohol or reduce very gradually. I think because it can be life-threatening. It can absolutely, that we're talking about right now is somebody with a very extreme level of alcohol addiction, which is now interfering with day-to-day functioning in a very, very real manner.
Suppose someone doesn't have access to a facility like this and they're right now experiencing some of the symptoms of withdrawal. How are there coping mechanisms that they could self-administer or a sort of do-it-yourself plan that might make things easier? I know that's an oversimplification, but
No, but it's a good question because we're talking about healthcare in a country where most people don't have access to specialized
and can't afford
services
it.
and can't afford it, right? So I think first things first, high risk situations where you know that either you've got severe trembling and shaking, or you feel your consciousness is altered, you don't know day, night, sense of time, hospital admission immediately. And it doesn't have to be a psychiatric hospital, which is a rarity, but a general hospital facility, emergency, should be able to provide you comfort and then redirect you to a place that can do detox for you. Withdrawal is more psychological, right? Couple of things that we tell people are always have a relapse prevention plan or a lapse prevention plan with you handy. So we never send people back without a plan, which means a plan for what your day is going to look like, a plan for anticipating high-risk situations. So people, places that might remind you and make you go for your drink again. Try and replace whatever your routine around your alcohol or your drug was with something else, whether it's you starting movement every day. And I'm not going to say intense exercise, but movement 20 minutes a day. I think movement is one of the most underrated medicines for mankind. I think we focus too much on just being fit or looking a certain way, but moving your body, I think reconnecting back with your body, trying to access pleasure again in your body is something that alcohol has taken away from you, right? And if you do a few things that are the opposite of what alcohol did for you, movement can regulate anxiety. And by movement, I don't mean structured exercise. It could be a walk in the garden barefoot. It could be cycling if that's what appeals to you. It could be playing music and dancing. It's getting your body back into the rhythm of not just being a container for alcohol and a container for your emotional sort of overwhelm. The other technique that people can also try is called urge surfing, which is knowing that urges or cravings are like waves. They come, they peak, and then they settle. No one in the world has ever experienced an urge that has never gone down. So urge surfing is really about breathing
Riding
your
the
way
wave.
through and riding the wave down to when it settles. Right? There is a larger problem, there is a larger perhaps trauma for many people that you must address. But in the short term, dealing with withdrawal is just about managing cravings. Withdrawals must be managed and often can be managed medically. And that's the message that I hope that we can reiterate to people is that there is help available.
this has been honestly the most hopeful talk, and I hope our viewers feel the same way about it. Thank you so much for that. It was extremely insightful, and I think that if the agenda was to equip our viewers with adequate information to propel hopefully their own journey in recovery or seeking the kind of help they need, I hope we fulfilled that. So thank you so much for everything. And
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.